magic behind Amarinda. We know how much work you have done for Indigenous theatre makers and actors in New York City and far beyond. And we know the opportunities for others you have forged and created. And we know the history you have been part of and the history you have been left out of. And we know what you have built here. And I love bringing my dog to your office and getting advice and scheming up ideas with you. And I will always think of last year at our last First Nations Dialogues meeting when you offered us medicine and you blessed the room. And it's the room that we're going to feast in a little bit. And I feel like that is what gave us the oomph to continue the work that you all have been doing for so long. And we thank you, and we have a few gifts for you. Rachel Maza, actor extraordinaire and director of Obligatory Theatre, is going to have a few words about Spiderwoman Theatre.
I'm deeply humbled and honoured to be tasked with honouring these extraordinary women who have paved the way, whose blood, sweat and tears have set the stones on which we now walk. Those who first kicked down the doors that were closed to us. To those who were not deterred by the lack of funding or the lack of spaces. They would make work regardless. So I want to acknowledge their strength and courage and determination, tenacity, and of course their talent. They would make work because they must. There was no separation between the politics and the art. The work was born out of the fight for our rights as the first peoples of the land that had been colonised. And we share this fight across the world, including Australia, of course. Our fight was no doubt fuelled by this extraordinary cross-fertilisation of ideas that was happening internationally. The First Nations peoples meeting at all kinds of delegations and festivals. And in these exchanges, we went back home to our countries inspired. And out of these conversations, our first theatre companies were born. Our first organisations were born. Our first self-determined service organisations were established. And I'm very aware, in fact, that my father was part of one of the delegations that came to America, in fact, here to New York in 1970. And it was during that time that my father met with the National Black Theatre of Harlem and would go back to Australia and establish the first modern black theatre companies. In fact, it was at that time that we adopted the term and now very proudly refer to ourselves as black. So when I use that term, you understand why. It was at that time that we would set up the first theatre company in 1970 in Newcastle, based in Melbourne, and then the National Black Theatre a couple of years later in Sydney, Redfern. Not long after, a theatre company would be established here called Spiderwoman in 1976. And there was a conference, and I'm not exactly sure what year it was, but sometime around this time was where my father would meet Spiderwoman at a conference where each other's works was being presented. And no doubt those stories I would then hear many years later, and I would get to catch up and get a bit more of the details of those exchanges, which I won't share here. So a generation later, I too would finally have the honour of meeting these extraordinary women, Gloria and Muriel of Spider-Woman, actually first in Toronto and then again in New York. And it was at this time, 4 years ago now, that I would meet Diane of Amarinda, another extraordinary organisation with this incredible longevity as well. And I love what you're about, your organisation, empowering Native American artists, giving voice and visibility. The only organisation of its kind in America. Huge. And we're hearing the same kind of words here from the fantastic drummers, Kevin and Emily and everyone who's spoken, but the need for us to not forget that why we are here and the opportunities that are presented to us are because of those who trod the path before us, who actually carved out the path for us. So to have this extraordinary opportunity to honour and pay our respects to these warriors is something we should be doing all the time. So theatre was born, Spider-Woman was born out of the need to give Native women voice. And they continue to make work that is provocative, is political, that pushes the form, that educates, that empowers and inspires, and of course entertains. So these extraordinary, inspirational women are the reason that we are here. And on behalf of everyone here, I pay my deepest respects and gratitude for the light that you shine so that we don't fall over. Thank you.
David Martin up to say a few more words about Amarinda.
Hello everyone, I'm David Martin, Ward Sill, Warm Springs, Chiricahua, Apache, Shinnecock, and Montauk Nations, chairperson of the board of Amarinda and the author of No Reservation, New York Contemporary Native American Art Movement. It's my great honor to say a few words about Diane Frayer. I've known Diane and have worked together with her for over 25 years. Diane is a citizen of Osage Nation, and she has documented Cherokee heritage as well. She's the founder and director of Amarinda, American Indian Artists Incorporated since 1987. Amarinda is the only multidisciplinary organization of its kind for Native artists in the United States. Diane is also a filmmaker who came from a storytelling tradition of her nation in Oklahoma to New York to attend college. A tireless fighter for cultural equity, her first featured film, The Reawakening, was the first film written and directed by a Native woman and wholly produced by Native people. Her second feature, A Heart Stays, is the first feature film with a Native woman in the lead role. Diane has received numerous fellowships and individual artist awards for her filmmaking. She's frequently called upon by the philanthropic establishment and others to serve in an advisory capacity for efforts to catalyze new philanthropic investment in contemporary Native American arts. Native theater has had many incarnations over the years since it first emerged nationally in New York in 1971. Under Diane's leadership, Amarinda established its theater program, which produced Native theater in New York first with staged readings of new plays by Native playwrights, then quickly progressing into full productions of new work by Native playwrights. In 2015, Amarinda established the first Native Shakespeare initiative in the United States and began with 2 full productions. Amarinda Theater has launched the careers of several Native women playwrights and a woman director with its productions of new work. In addition, its productions revitalize and honor the work of established theater artists. It's been also the catalyst for playwrights and directors receiving fellowships and residencies for their work. Actors' careers are also advanced, and individual theater artists receive recognition through insightful articles in Amarinda's publication, Talking Stick, Native Arts Quarterly. As Diane has said, when she first came to New York, she saw ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and she believed that Native people could achieve greatness as well. As a seminal artist of the New York movement, she shared similar convictions with the other movement artists that were grounded in traditional Native values and a mutually shared creative vision. These individuals, all co-founders of the New York contemporary Native American art movement, collectively began charting a course continuing through to today's generations of artists from many tribal nations, providing a legacy of creative diversity unequaled outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. The place where Diane was raised was formative in her life's work. She grew up loving the stories of her Osage people, listening to her grandparents, who raised her and her sisters, and other Osage elders who were born before the turn of the last century, speaking in their language and participating in ceremonies. Their communication was another kind of storytelling. She knew that she would eventually create and interpret stories to non-Native audiences which would serve to refute the exploitation and humiliation of Native people depicted on stage and in Hollywood movies and television. Parallel to her love of Native stories and the practice of communicating them, her interest and appreciation for two-dimensional art, the painting and rich cultural institutions that also inspired many other Native artists from different Native nations living in New York. She fulfilled her love of the spoken word and the visual in her filmmaking. So thank you, Diane Frere, for your years of creativity and commitment to the continuation of work in the field of cinema as you go forward with your new film, The Heart Stays, which tells the story of 2 sisters' struggle to identify with traditional Native values within the context of modern society. And thank you also for your additional work in Amarinda, fostering artistic production by Native artists at the highest level and actively providing encouragement and support in a culturally relevant framework. You are an inspiration, and we wish you well in your new projects to come. Thank you.